Today's Fivestack brought to you by Ground News. You can get 40% off right now if you go to groundnews.com/Fivestack. 40% off just for our viewers here at Fivestack. And Dean Blundell is off today, so it's just me for maybe not even a full hour, because Dean's not here. It may even be 30 minutes. I apologize for being a little late, but I wanted to get in here because there's so much news going on today. I couldn't be without you. And I wanted to share what we know about every big story that is happening right now. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. If you're at home on Substack, where we are, as our main network is, hello, we welcome you, and we're watching all your chats, and everybody who's watching us on YouTube or X or wherever else you might be. It's great to have you with us. What we do on the show every single day, it's normally Dean and me, and we do the top 5 breaking news stories. There may be 10 breaking news stories today. I don't know. There's so many all happening at exactly the same time. We're going to get you caught up in all of them. We have breaking news out of Paris, where we're learning that the Rothschild bank has been raided by French police. That's in the Epstein investigation. That is massive, massive news. And we'll tell you about what that is all about and coming up in a few minutes. Plus, we have this update recently just happened, the NTSB press conference into that Air Canada crash at LaGuardia. Interesting findings about the mess going on in LaGuardia, air traffic control, the system's not working, a real nightmare if you're planning on a trip in the United States or anywhere really in the world leading in and out of the United States. Be very, very cautious, because this report and this interview, this press conference, very chilling indeed what they found out. Plus, we'll talk about the Iran war, the so-called talks, which never really happened with the Iranians, but Donald Trump believes they did. What was that all about? Was it about rigging the oil market? That could be the case. We'll tell you why we think it is. And later on, I'll talk to you about my new expose on narrative.org right now, which is about the Commerce Secretary. Howard Lutnik is so compromised in our investigation that we can't actually believe how many points of conflict there are for this Commerce Secretary. And we will detail all 10 for you, as we've done in our reports here at narrative.org, of the 10 ways that Howard Lutnik is compromised. All of that is coming up. Plus, well, there's just so much more. I might as well just get into it. Let's begin with the big breaking news out of LaGuardia, out of New York. As you may know, the National Transportation Safety Board just held a press conference on the deadly runway collision at LaGuardia Airport. It's quite remarkable. Well, they described it as overlapping series of systemic failures. Now, that should alarm every person who flies in this country, as we just mentioned. And here's exactly what happened. On Sunday night at 11:40 p.m., Air Canada Express Flight 8646, a CRJ-900 regional jet operated by Jazz Aviation, that's the not-so-luxurious brand of Air Canada, the lower tier, carrying 72 passengers and 4 crew members on a flight from Montreal, landed on runway 4 at LaGuardia and then struck a Port Authority fire truck that was crossing the runway. The plane was traveling between 93 and 105 miles per hour. Can you imagine that impact? Must have been absolutely gruesome. And of course, the pictures that we've all seen add to that notion. Look at the top of the, so at least the nose of this plane, completely smashed in. And it's easy to see why the pilots lost their lives. The people in the fire trucks are alive and well. And that's surprising because, as we point out, that giant jet coming at you when you're in a fire truck, you wouldn't expect to survive. Both people in the fire trucks are happy. They're alive today. They've been told, or at least we've been told by people who've been able to see them. Now, the big question came today when we heard the NTSB administrator discuss a bunch of different things that went wrong, the cascading events that went wrong. And I want to play you some of the highlights of this press conference, because it's quite remarkable. This was not just human failure, the fact that they weren't even sure if they were staffed correctly. This was also potentially systems failure, because they're supposed to have this radar tracking device that tracks all vehicles and all planes at the airport. In this case, the fire truck in question didn't have that transponder in it, so they weren't able to track it. But even if it did have the transponder in it, the NTSB administrator says the system they have actually says it couldn't read that much traffic. There was too much traffic and too many vehicles in one location for it to give a clear analysis of what was going on. So they've got a system that basically doesn't work to track every working fire truck or vehicle at the airport, including planes. and it's not functional, it seems, under these high stress conditions. And we all know how absolutely stressful these airports have been for the last few days. Let's take a listen to the NTSB administrator here. She arrived late, by the way. It took her 3 hours just to get through to somebody at the airport because of the delays and the crazy pressure the TSA has been under because of the freeze. Let's listen to her now talk about these three key issues.
Did not have a transponder. And it would have been helpful when you have a radar radar target. It does not provide you with the information that you need, like it would for an aircraft, as a controller. Yes. Is there any indication from the CVR that the pilots saw the fire truck on the runway? I don't have information at this time on that. However, we are doing further analysis on our cockpit voice recorder. We have a group that we have formed that will analyze the CVR. And part of when they analyze is they will talk in the group about what they're hearing, what they've heard, any sort of background noises, and we'll provide a transcript, and then we'll release that publicly, so we'll know more then.
Chair Hamdi, Andrew Schiff from NBC 4 New York, WNBC TV. With regard to the midnight shift, is it literally a midnight shift that you expressed concerns about in the past, or is it sort of that later shift when there's typically less traffic at an airport? The reason I ask it is around this time, late at night on a Sunday night at LaGuardia, there's still lots of arrivals. To that degree, does that raise questions about the protocol and staffing here at this?
This is about staffing in the midnight shift.
So the question is about the shift, and are we just concerned about that shift in the past, or would there be other shifts? And does it make sense to have two controllers in the cab with such a busy airport, and this be sort of standard operating procedures and common practice across the national airspace? I think I restated it accurately and have now forgotten what you asked me. But on your standard operating procedure, on the standard operating procedures, look, LaGuardia is 900 flights, I believe, per day. That's pretty substantial. It's not the same as other airspace or other airports across the national airspace. That's certainly something we will look at as part of this investigation. How that would that make sense? You know, why would that make sense at LaGuardia? We will. That is part of our analysis in this investigation. And what was the other one? Oh, on the mid shift, we have identified the mid shift generally as concern in other investigations, largely due to fatigue, because it spans that time frame at your circadian low during the day when you're most fatigued. Yes.
So they're saying the midnight shift there is a problem. Earlier on, you may have heard her talk about the systems, these Aztec systems, I believe they call them, or ASD. These are the systems that they're blaming a lot of this on. You could tell in their early analysis, they're stressing the fact that they could not use the data from the ASD system because it was overloaded with too much data, because all these vehicles, these fire trucks, were trying to cross the working runway. There's a plane coming in. There are other planes coming in. There's a lot of delays, which means there's a lot of planes circling the skies. There's a lot of planes that are trying to take off at the same time. So the system that's designed to track, the radar system that's designed to track all the vehicles and the planes at LaGuardia basically gave up. It threw its arms up and said, hey, I can't do this. Too much data. I can't actually provide you the information. Then she also said that the lead truck in this situation didn't even have a transponder in it. So it was crossing the runway based on the air traffic controller saying, hey, this runway is shut down, right? You said it was shut down. The guy said, yes, you've got the clear go ahead. And they started driving. Then he said, stop. But he didn't see that the fire truck was necessarily on its way to crossing the runway or even on the runway, because he couldn't have any visibility in it because it didn't have a transponder. And I'm just going to play you another short clip where you can sort of get a hint that that's where they're going with.
Who will be providing that a ASD replay of the event, ASD Airport Surface Detection Equipment replay of the event, and that is actually looking at the ASD display that was provided to the controller. And so we will be looking at that, where we can see where the aircraft was at certain times and whether the truck was visible on ASD. We'll also be getting an ASD analysis from the FAA's Tech Center.
I mean, this seems like a remarkable bit of information that really should be grabbing the headlines, because it doesn't seem like the system that they have to track all these aircraft on the ground is functioning, because it's overloaded by data right now. Now, maybe LaGuardia is a very busy airport, not the busiest, but a very busy airport. Maybe it only applies to busy airports, but they have a real problem on their hands. It's not only the staffing, it's a system called ASDX, specifically designed to warn controllers when vehicles and aircraft are on a collision course on the ground. It is supposed to issue an alert. Apparently, it did not issue an alert. And that was just too many vehicles clustered together. That's the reason that the ASDX manufacturers are saying they'll be able to reconstruct that. The NTSB administrator is saying that she will be able to, she's asked for the data, and they'll be able to see exactly what the air traffic controller was able to see on his ASDX terminal, which is sitting in front of him. Now, normally, he'd see an alert if something like this was happening, but in this case did not get an alert. Of course, it's obvious he didn't get an alert because the truck didn't have a transponder in it. So even that is two problems overlaying each other. Then, of course, the communications failed as the Air Canada flight approached. A controller realized the truck was still on the active runway. That controller began screaming, "Stop, stop, stop," about 10 times, if I counted correctly. But investigators have confirmed that at least one critical transmission was stepped on, meaning it was partially blocked by another radio call. That is significant as well. This kind of radio traffic, when you've got this heightened traffic going on, because all these delays are being caused, let's be frank about this, by people not getting paid to do the work. So they're not showing up to work. There's lots of people who are understaffed. Lots of positions are understaffed. Maybe the people that are showing up for work aren't as qualified as they should be. The NTSB does not yet know whether the firefighters in the truck ever heard the order to stop. And that is a big deal. Now, we know that they're at least alive, so we'll know once they're being interviewed whether they heard that order to stop. But can you imagine the fear as they were crossing a runway and this huge jet, this Air Canada jet, pummeling towards them? What an incredibly frightening moment. And then to survive that, you must be beyond thankful. Of course, the two Air Canada pilots not nearly as lucky, but everyone else on that plane got off alive. Even the air stewardess, who was ejected from her seat and thrown many, many feet out of the plane. She was on the jump seat and survived that too. What a remarkable story in many ways, but still what an indictment on the Trump administration, which had an opportunity to fix this. This didn't have to happen. There was a way to avoid all of this, but the Trump administration decided to go ahead anyhow and keep the pressure on the Senate, keep the pressure on everybody to fund the entire Department of Homeland Security and to get the SAVE Act passed. And this is what you get. You get two dead pilots and a calamity. And now, or at least we'll be able to realize all the shortcomings of the technology and the staffing that the Trump administration created completely out of their own lack of understanding of the systems and lack of responsibility and just playing politics for everything it's worth. This is what you get. You get two air traffic controllers, two pilots dead. A lot of people are concerned about whether it's safe to travel in the United States today. You can ask the question of a lot of people, but I think the evidence speaks for itself. The NTSB is saying itself that the systems they have in place right now are obviously not coping with the traffic that is accumulating at some of these busier airports. So I would say that's a big caution. Second big caution, of course, is the fact that they are understaffed, as you heard of there, especially at midnight shift. There's only two people at LaGuardia for the entire airport, one of the busiest, 900 flights a day, she said. That is not, that's not enough, obviously. And they're going to say, well, we need more AI, we need more systems. We maybe need more people because 900 flights with 2 people on a shift, maybe they're working 8-hour shifts. So maybe there's 10 people throughout the day. That's not enough people. People get burnt out. Their focus gets shifted, especially in the middle of the night. It's ridiculous, really, that they're putting so many passengers and citizens in harm's way by understaffing this. And of course, this goes back to the Doge Elon Musk cuts, which happened, willy-nilly. They didn't even know what they were doing. They basically just gutted the TSA, and this is what you get for that. Big story developing. Keep an eye out on everything the NTSB is reporting. This investigation is going to reveal a lot of wrongdoings, and it looks to me like some real, maybe even criminal activity that's been going on inside the Transportation Secretary's purview there at the Transportation Department. Let's move into some of the other news stories developing today, because there are many indeed. The number 4 story, well, this is really, let's call it number 5, because we'll get back to the airport one later on. You say they appear twice. That story appears twice. The other big story is related to what's going on at airlines. Senate Republicans and the White House, apparently, and I don't know, this might be developing as we speak right now. There might be an update. You guys can tell me if anything's developing around this as it's happening. But my latest reports before getting on the air here with you is that Senate Republicans in the White House are discussing a deal to end the partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, which has been shut down since February the 14th. It's nearly 6 weeks. The deal under discussion would fund every part of DHS except the Division of Immigration Customs Enforcement, that's ICE, responsible for arresting and deporting undocumented immigrants. So this will basically reopen TSA. This is Trump caving. Is it Tuesday? It must be Tuesday. It must be Taco Tuesday, because here is the President of the United States again caving in, threatening everybody, saying he's not doing anything until the SAVE Act is passed. Then you get 2 dead pilots in LaGuardia, and now he's willing to allow airports to get funding again, and has agreed to this. Well, not has agreed. It looks like he will agree to this DHS funding deal. Now, it's not done. This mercurial president could do anything at any time, and he's unpredictable at best. But there is a feeling from Toon and his associates, the GOP, that this is going to go through. We'll keep an eye out for that. The rest of the funding will come out of the reconciliation process that will ultimately fund ICE. So ICE is certainly not going to be funded. That will be funded. It's just going to happen at a later stage. By the way, the president today, and I'll play the story perhaps a little later on, was also announcing the appointment or approving the swearing in, I should say, of Mark Wayne Mullins, the new Department of Homeland Security. So I'm just rearranging my screen here while I'm trying to talk at the same time. Can be a little complicated. Because I wanted to see if I've got that Trump clip to play you. And I don't yet. I'm just going to see if I can pull it up. So give me a second here while we do that. And if I don't have it, I'll come back to it, because it really relates to a number of our stories today about how the president is handling Iran, because the president believes he's now won the Iran war, that it's over. That is, of course, highly misguided, but that's what he said today. And the clip I wanted to play is... No, neither of them seem to be here. So stand by. I'll get those for you in a bit, and then we'll get back to that. But it is interesting that, in his mind, this war is over. Of course, it's not over. There's a lot more that still needs to be played, and we'll explain that all coming up in a little bit. Moving on from the events in the Senate now to this other massive news story. And of course, I'm a little biased here. I spent a lot of time on the Epstein file, but French police raided the Paris headquarters of Edmond de Rothschild's bank as part of the expanding Jeffrey Epstein investigation. This has been confirmed by Bloomberg and the Washington Post and the Associated Press and multiple French outlets. The target of the investigation is a former bank employee named Fabrice Aiden, who previously served as a diplomat at the United Nations. Aiden worked at the Paris arm of the Swiss-based Edmond de Rothschild Bank from 2014 to 2016. His name appeared in more than 200 documents in the Epstein files, including emails sent directly to Jeffrey Epstein between 2010 and 2016. Some from his personal account and some from his from his UN accounts. French prosecutors suspect that Aden may have shared diplomatic documents with Epstein, though Aden has denied any wrongdoing. The investigation was opened by the Parquet National Financier, France's financial crimes prosecution office, after a referral from France's foreign ministry. It follows the release of the Epstein files and the subsequent French reporting that connected Aden to the network. Now, as you know, CEO Arlene de Rothschild was reportedly present during the search, and you know that she, Ariane de Rothschild, I should say, was a huge communicator of Jeffrey Epstein, maybe one of his best friends, because they would speak almost every other day. There was a very, very clear communication line. And as we exposed earlier on, just a few weeks ago here on Narrative, the Rothschild network, the family itself, seems to have surrounded Jeffrey Epstein for decades. That is how Leslie Wexner was first recommended Jeffrey Epstein to be hired. And if you think about that, that happened in the late 1980s. That is as early as the Rothschild family was connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And then we found out that all the way to 2014, 2016, after the fact that he had been arrested, after that he got that incredible plea deal, they still kept in touch with him. Not only did they stay in touch with him, they paid him a fortune, $25 million between 2015 and 2016, if I'm not mistaken, to help them with some issues they were having. I mean, that's what they said it was for. Who knows what it was for? But it is remarkable to me that we are living in a world right now where the Rothschild family, which would have been an untouchable family, is now under investigation. Maybe not directly, maybe it's just this guy Aden, but you can bet that this will spread because the Rothschilds are very, very important to the entire Rothschilds, to the entire Epstein story. And I've shown you this spiderweb chart that I call the supergraph. I've shown you this before, and people always are like, "What the hell is that?" It is a little much to understand. I'm going to try to pull it up for you here in full. And you can see this is all, this is the work I've done on the Greatest Heist. And basically what I've done here is taken every person and entity and interest and everything else that we have connected to Jeffrey Epstein. In this case, you can see it's all a moving chart. Has to be 3D because there are so many entities. And we've connected all of these dots together. So you've got, here's Leslie Wexner, for example, close to Jeffrey Epstein. Well, gets unwieldy sometimes. And you can get a sense of how big this chart is. And this is only half of it because there is even more to come. But you can see these separate nodes keep forming here. And you can guess one of them is Donald Trump. One of them is Putin. It becomes very predictable who you're going to find in these different nodes. And this is growing, as I point out. But I did want to show you what we've done, and this came up earlier on, in trying to understand the Rothschilds. Sorry about that. I guess I forgot to put that off. Let me show you exactly what's going on here with the Rothschilds, because we have a button for that. And what this does is it takes us all the way into the Jeffrey Epstein world, but it shows us all the connections with Rothschild. So this is super interesting to me. I mean, I was blown away by the number of connections to the Rothschild. So here's Jeffrey Epstein, right? And then you've got all these characters that you might be familiar with, like Leon Black. Here's Howard Lutnik, the current Commerce Secretary, and we get into him a little bit later on in today's show. Here's Oleg Deripaska. Ehud Barak is here, the former Israeli Prime Minister. Ghislaine Maxwell is here. Peter Thiel is here, also connected. Viktor Vekselberg, the oligarch from Israel and from Russia. And then all these green entities are actually Rothschild entities, and they all have different ways of interacting with the Jeffrey Epstein world. And there are many. We know that it was Lynn Forrester de Rothschild that introduced Clinton to Jeffrey Epstein. We also know that Lynn was a big supporter of the Clintons. So that's an important node. I think she also introduced him to Dershowitz somewhere in here. I don't see Dershowitz on this list, but you can bet it's connected there. Then we have this particular bank, the sort of Evelyn the Rothschild Bank that is currently under investigation. And we've connected one other big node here. It's just for the Rothschild family because there are so many of them. But it's interesting. There's another name here, Nate Rothschild. Now, this Nate Rothschild connects to all of this through Oleg Deripaska. And Oleg Deripaska and Nate Rothschild were involved in connecting the British lord who just was, I forget his name, it's going to come to me in a second, but too many names sometimes. Does anyone know what this is? Who I'm trying to find the British lord who was just recently arrested. I'm so sorry. I wish I can remember all these names. Sometimes it just spin. They're in my brain somewhere. I just got to shake it around a little bit, and maybe I'll find it. Anyhow, you'll tell me because I'm sure Mandelson. Thank you so much, Shoshana. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. So yeah, so Lord Mandelson, there he is, Peter Mandelson. I should have seen it right there. Was connected to Nate Rothschild. So that's an interesting thing. Nate is an unusual character. We don't spend a lot of time talking about Nate, but Nate is considered an espionage guy, perhaps even a spy for the Russians. So to see him connected to Peter Mandelson, that's a very, very big deal. And this is just to give you a sense of how all of this world connects to Jeffrey Epstein. And and if anyone wants to ask me any questions, feel free to, because I don't get a chance to really go through these very often. So if you have anything you want to ask, go ahead, because we can just bounce around through these different characteristics or these different entities and show you what's going on here. I did mention Howard Lutnik. We've been doing an extraordinary amount of reporting here at Narrative about him. And yesterday we published a story in The Greatest Heist, Chapter 9 of Book 2. I know it's complicated. Book 2. So let me just back up here. The Greatest Heist is all about the crime that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein committed together. It's the greatest crime in history. It's the stealing of America. These guys have been at it for decades. And what we've done in various chapters and in various books is try to unpack this for everybody as slowly as we can and meticulously as we can to prove it. And book 2 is all about the 2008 crash. It's such a significant period of time because in 2008, maybe 40 to 80 trillion dollars of value was siphoned out of the American economy. You probably know people who lost their homes, some people who couldn't get their college careers going. Or college or couldn't buy their dream vacations, their timeshares, call it whatever you will. A lot of people lost everything in 2008. So we go back to the Greatest Heist to this period of time because we wanted to see what triggered that. And in all our investigations, the thing that came up the most is that Jeffrey Epstein had a pivotal role in triggering the events that led up to 2008. Now, it's not that people didn't know that there was a crash going to happen. It was pretty obvious that there was a crash that was going to happen because everyone was over-leveraged, mortgage-backed securities were way out of control. But the timing was of some people's discretion. Now, it's interesting that it landed up being Jeffrey Epstein, who I believe triggered that collapse. And that triggered, if you will, a series of dominoes that flowed out from that. And those dominoes included the thing that happened after he triggered the start of the collapse, which was in Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns was still alive. It was still going on, but it was sort of beginning to die. The thing that happened right afterwards was that Cantor Fitzgerald, the brokerage firm owned by Howard Lutnik, began a massive sell-off of $40 billion worth of toxic assets. That's the real thing that washed through the market and really hurt the market. And that's why it ultimately crashed. Bear Stearns went down, Lehman went down. It's a horrible set of events that we all remember quite clearly. That Cantor event is so interesting because most of Cantor Fitzgerald's clients are sovereign banks. They're not your typical, it's not a mom and pop dealership. It's not a brokerage. It's not something that you and I can go into unless we're a sovereign, a sovereign bank or we have something else like that to offer them. They're not really going to talk to us. But if you are a sovereign bank like the Qataris or the UAE or the Saudis, well, you could go see Cantor and Cantor would be able to do very large transactions in the stock market for you with $40 billion of value. You can see how big they really were at the time. And so in that 60-day period that followed the initial triggering of the collapse of the economy. So the collapse of Bear Stearns happened first, but it was triggered by Jeffrey Epstein. Then there's a 60-day period where Cantor Fitzgerald under Howard Lutnik sell this massive amount, $40 billion of toxic assets, and that really crashes the market. They do the sales mostly for sovereign banks, for sovereign funds. And these are obviously foreign-owned sovereign funds that come from big royal families. They come from Russia. There's a lot of sovereign funds around the world, mostly of them not very democratic. And that sell-off is what tore up the market. But the reason they were doing that is because they were trying to get liquid. They wanted to sell all these assets because they needed the cash. Why did they need the cash? It's because by timing the market, by knowing when the market was going to happen, they could sell high, which is the best thing when you're an investor, right? You want to sell high. And then watch the market crash. And then they have all this liquid cash that they got when they sold high, and they could buy everything low, pennies on the dollar, because everything crashed. That is how the biggest or the greatest heist really worked. The greatest heist was a manipulation of the market to pump and dump it. So you, the American taxpayer, would be paying all your wealth, handing over your wealth to foreign governments. That is how it worked. And so on the surface of it, when everything sort of rebounded, everyone was like, everything's okay. But things weren't okay. What really happened was billions and billions of dollars, maybe trillions, were siphoned out of the American economy into sovereign funds. And these sovereign funds and their countries became richer and richer and richer and wealthier, and of course more powerful with that wealth. And then they came back with that money and they tried to distort our politics. Of course, you would do that if you were them, because now they could buy politics. It was so wealthy. And then they get Donald Trump in office, and the rest is kind of history. Now, Howard Lutnik, the guy who was responsible for that sell-off, and it blows my mind, this has not been discovered before, is part of this administration. He's the Commerce Secretary, the guy who did the sell-off, who was involved in the heist, who's involved in this big theft of America's wealth to the sovereign funds, actually involved in the heist itself, is now in the cabinet. And I did this chart because I know that the greatest heist is kind of dense and it's hard to get through sometimes because there's so much detail. But I wanted everyone to understand exactly how compromised this cabinet secretary is. So these are just 10, and there are many, many more. This is the 10. I just wanted to give you a sense of what was going on here. Ways that the Commerce Secretary is compromised. Publish this on narrative.org if you want the full article today at narrative.org, NARATIV.org. And there is a lot here. We go from Jean-Pierre Aubin, who's the co-CEO of a subsidiary of Lutnik's called BGC. What's fascinating about him is he has these offshore holdings that are directly connected to Russian entities. So it's not even like a pretend Russian influence there. It's a direct link. And he's the co-CEO of Lutnik's company. Then there's the Moscow Investment Bank, also known as Renaissance Capital or Renaissance Capital. Lev Parnas was telling me yesterday correctly. A huge bank, huge investment bank, blessed by Putin in many ways. They bought Citibank Russia many years ago, also directly connected to Howard Lutnik and Cantor Fitzgerald. Two Russian bits there, right? Third Russian one. You've got the Shell network that was connected to Paul Manafort and Oleg Deripaska and Gates stealing money from the Ukrainians. You remember, as before they came to America to capture the American democracy, they went to Ukraine to capture the Ukrainian one. And they installed a guy named Yanukovych, who was basically the Trump of Ukraine before Trump. And in that process of installing him, they stole billions and billions of dollars out of the Ukrainian treasury, which will give you a good clue of what they're doing right now in the American treasury. They're going to walk away with trillions there too. And this is what happened with Manafort. Paul Manafort ended up being Trump's campaign manager, and Deripaska, the oligarch who's connected to Putin all the way back in 2013 or thereabouts. Well, guess what? That Shell network that they use is called Interjura CY. Interjura CY, stands for Cyprus at the end there. also connected to Howard Lutnik and Cantor Fitzgerald. Then you've got the architect of the Deutsche Bank mirror trade. Huge scandal involving the Russians where they basically laundered $10 billion in money that they shouldn't have laundered, but they did somehow because they used this mirror trading scheme created by Anshu Jain, who was at the time their president at Deutsche Bank. He is the guy who created that scheme, who ran that scheme. When he got fired, where did he land up going? He landed up going as Cantor's president. He became Cantor Fitzgerald's president. Dreamy job. After committing the biggest money laundering scandal in the last few decades, $10 billion of Russian money illegally flooding the world, Cantor hires him. Howard Lutnik hires him. That's a great guy, great hire. Then you've got Deutsche Bank's controller, also a very, what can I say, not a clean guy is probably the best way to describe him. He was hired as Cantor's CFO for the gaming company that they have, this gambling company basically on sports betting, that's also registered out of Malta. His name, Douglas Barnard. And then that turned out to be another big scandal for Cantor and Howard, hugely compromised. That was a big money laundering effort too, all connected to Cantor. On the right side, you've got number 6 there, Bear Stearns. And this all comes from the Epstein files. Why I'm so, was able to stumble across all this data is inside the Epstein files. There is a lot about Howard Lutnik and Cantor Fitzgerald, which is really interesting because a lot of people, 2 very important whistleblowers in particular, called up the FBI and said, there are connections between Lutnik and Epstein you need to investigate. These 2 are really very connected. They're business partners. There's a history there. Ghislaine Maxwell is connected. There's Sarah Ferguson's connected. Epstein's connected. You got to go check it out. The police filed these reports. They have them on file. We know that because we've all seen them, but they didn't do anything about it. Oh, I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they investigated it. They certainly didn't charge the guy. And there were 34, I think, separate investigations that were launched into Lutnik for money laundering. So when the guy was finally cleared to vetted for his commerce secretary position, lo and behold, the FBI gave him a completely clear no problem. That's not what was on the files. The file said he's involved in money laundering. But when he was vetted by the FBI, they completely cleared him and let him go through. That isn't a scandal. I don't know what is, because it is remarkable to me that this guy under investigation for 34 different versions of money laundering involving Russians becomes the commerce secretary. Since then, he's lied about everything because he's denied knowing Epstein. That turned out to be a lie. He's denied going to the island. That turned out to be a lie. He denied knowing him after 2012, but he actually was in business with him. It just goes on and on and on. One of those whistleblowers called up the FBI and told them about something called Parabridge International Services. Again, this is another Deutsche Bank pipeline to money launder through Singapore and Hong Kong. And so it's connected to Russia through the money laundering efforts of Deutsche Bank. And what's fascinating to me here is this is not so much fascinating as it is disgusting, is that they're basically stealing charity money. Howard Lutnik's firm lost a lot of people at 9/11. He miraculously survived. But at that time, he lost a huge number of staffers, and he promised he would dedicate a huge amount of money every year to the families of the disaster who died in 9/11. Turns out he stole a lot of it. He stole it, or somebody stole it, because all that stuff that happened on that charity day, all of that sort of disappeared, according to this whistleblower. I mean, there was never an investigation, so how will we know for sure? But that's what we understand happened. We mentioned earlier the Epstein business partnership between Epstein and Howard Lutnik. This is a company called AdTech. This happened in 2012. He said he didn't even know Epstein by after 2005. Bear in mind, they're neighbors. So how could he not know him? They obviously knew each other. They were neighbors, adjoining walls. And then in 2012, he signs this deal for AdTech, or AdFin was the name of the company. AdTech is a description. It's just shocking. It's just shocking. Then crypto is such a huge thing. This is another story I'm going to be dropping later tonight. So please watch out for the story. And when it lands, share it widely because it is so important. There is so much corruption at the core of Howard Lutnik and his family that it blows your mind away. So they are heavily invested in Tether, which is the stable coin connected to cryptocurrency. And I know that's also kind of confusing when people talk about it, but there's a big company called Tether. Tether actually owns Cantor Fitzgerald. So Cantor Fitzgerald is the company that is meant to supervise and hold all the assets that are meant to secure all the crypto that Tether has. So crypto, let's just say crypto has Tether has 1,000 coins of 1,000 crypto coins, let's say. Cantor Fitzgerald is meant to secure all of those in US dollar holdings because it's a stable coin. And so they do that. They keep, if there's 1,000 crypto coins here, they'll find the US dollar value for that and they will hold that. All very well and good, except how compromising is it that the group that funded Howard Lutnik's family's purchase of Cantor is Tether. And I'll explain this in a more coherent way when I release the story today. But I've just told you for the first time, this is going to be a big story today, that the group that actually owns Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a custodian of everything that happens at Tether, is Tether. And this guy, Howard Lutnik, is the Commerce Secretary. And he's the guy who, amongst other people right now, is deciding crypto policy. In other words, he's the one governing what happens with the Genius Act, which, lo and behold, gives Tether a big break. And what should infuriate everybody about this is that up until 2024, Tether was under investigation by the SEC, by the FBI. And then when Trump came in and when Howard Lutnik came in, the entire crypto investigation unit was fired, was completely dismissed. And all those investigations into Tether and into other crypto disappeared. There could not be a more convincing chart than this, I don't think, that would tell you that the Commerce Secretary is so compromised, is so bought out by crypto and by Russia that they are basically in charge of one of the most important departments in the US cabinet. And it's clear that they are implementing policies that are helpful to Russia and helpful to crypto because it helps them. So keep that in mind. We'll keep that story going. This chart you see here with a lot more detail is available to you at narrative.org, NARATIV.org. It's free. There's no paywall on this because I really thought that everybody needs to understand it. Everybody needs to see it. Howard Lutnik is a very compromised person, and his denials mean nothing. He's lied under oath so many times. It is astounding none of this came up in his vetting process, in confirmation process, but it's out now. It needs to be spread. So please find the story if you can, read it, share it as widely as you can. I think this chart really lays it out. We have a real problem with the Commerce Secretary, and he's part of the Epstein files. We shouldn't be having a cabinet secretary as part of the Epstein files. If France can raid the Rothschild bank, you would think we could at least not have a Commerce Secretary and a president who are in the Epstein files as much as they are. I mean, that should be as obvious as anything. But, just because it's obvious doesn't mean it has to happen. Not in America these days. What a wild time we're living in. What a wild, wild time. Where are we on this countdown? Because I think I just did the Rothschild story. Well, it's good to get to this next story because also ties into all the wonderful corruption in the Trump administration because there is so much of it. This is another story that we posted last night on narrative.org. And I urge you to find it. It is paywalled, but it's worth your time if you're a subscriber or not. If you want to become a subscriber, it's a good reason to check this out. And I'll just lay it out for you what happened in the last few days with oil prices and what Donald Trump did in order to make money for Russia. I mean, there's no other way to look at this. At 6:50 a.m. on Sunday morning, 15 minutes before Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he was halting strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure for 5 days, $580 million in oil and stock futures moved in a single burst. 580 million. And we're talking about the minutes, 15 minutes before that Truth Social post came out. So someone with inside knowledge, knowing what he was about to post, made this move. on the markets, $580 million in oil and stock futures in a single burst at 6:50 a.m. on a Sunday. Bet you that kind of trade doesn't happen very often. S&P 500 E-mini futures surged. West Texas Intermediate crude was shorted hard. I won't even try to explain that to you. I think I know what it means, but I'll leave it up to better minds to do that. By 7:05 a.m., when Trump's post actually went live, the trade was already placed. So even before he could make the announcement, someone inside his administration, someone with knowledge of what was going on, made a lot of money by basically shorting the market, knowing the price was going to go down and up in this case. I think it was going to go up in this case. No, it dropped. Oh, I'm sorry. It came down at this case. So the way they short the market is they predict it's going to go down, right? So you short it, you got a future that's going to show the market collapsing. And then, in fact, oil dropped 11% on that day. Stocks ripped 2.5%. So you know that because they made that bet correctly, because they predicted correctly that the market was going down, suddenly they made a fortune in minutes based on insider trading, based on nothing other than what the president may have told them. You know, the president may have said, hey, go put this trade down because we're going to, maybe he didn't, maybe it wasn't him, but he's the one who issued this statement. Put this bet down. We're going to make a fortune out of this. Paul Krugman, Nobel laureate, said today that this was treason in the futures market. And it absolutely is, because we have a war going on in Iran right now. People are dying. American soldiers are in the line of fire. You've got American blood spilled. You've got Iranian blood spilled. All at the same time, while someone in the administration, maybe Donald Trump himself, are busy playing, roulette, basically, with the markets and gaming the markets, trying to find some sort of profit centers in this market instead of worrying about the fact that people are dying and that gas prices are going up in America and that people can't afford their lives. This president seems, and the White House seems to be more concerned about who's going to make the inside buck on something like this. And the tell there is he keeps talking about there being negotiations and going on and the like, and there aren't negotiations going on. The Qataris today said there's no negotiations. The Iranians said there's no negotiations. So he's either talking to himself, which, let's face it, it's possible he's talking to himself. I mean, it could be that he's just completely delusional, or he's doing this for the sake of the market play, because he did get the market reaction that he thought he was going to get. He made a lot of money, or someone made a lot of money off this. May not even be illegal, but it sure is not what the president and the White House should be doing at a time like this. It makes you question the entire war. It makes you think about, here's a Russian asset. I believe that Donald Trump is a Russian asset. I believe he's a compromised president, that he was installed by Russia, by Saudi Arabia, by Israel, by China, by the UAE, and maybe a couple of other countries in order to do exactly what he's doing now, manipulate the markets. These very same players, by the way, are the Lutnik clients from Cantor Fitzgerald. A lot of these same sovereign funds that trashed the market in 2008, stole $80 trillion out of the market in 2008, are the same players playing this game with Donald Trump right now. They're the very same players that are playing games with our lives, that are playing games with our livelihoods and games with our food supply, just so they can make billions here or a billion there. They don't care about you and me. They care about money they're making, because that's all we are to them. We're part of the game. Meanwhile, you've got 1/5 of the world's oil supply tied up in the Strait of Hormuz. Brent crude has surged to $120 a barrel. Who does that benefit? It benefits only Vladimir Putin and Iran. So Vladimir Putin, who has had a economy about to collapse, suddenly has a booming economy because of this war. Suddenly, he's back at it. He's got an ability to rebuild his armed forces to fight against Ukraine. So the American military, via the American president that has been compromised and captured by the Russians, they're using the American military to fund the Russian economy so they could fight a war against Ukraine. And this trade, this dirty trade, this inside trade that the president or someone in the White House did is proof that this is a market play. It may even be that Iran's in on it, because the money that they're all making just by these prices going up, by the shortage in the oil price, is massive. And what does that mean? It means that Russia will be able to rearm itself, come to war against the United States, come war against anybody, because we've used all our ammunition, and they now have the money, the supply chain to China is existing already. All they have to do is rebuild their military. This is how compromised and treasonous this president is. He is committing mass treason. High treason is the term I would use. This is high treason. This is what it looks like. A president who is aiding and abetting not the American people, but our enemies. That is the definition of treason. We are at war, and right now that is exactly what he is doing. That is the number 3 story. The number 2 story, it all ties together today. I mentioned that. The number 2 story from the New York Times today kind of blew my mind, because I was like, how's this even possible that MBS has so much say over what is going on? But he does. He has lots of say what's going on. So let me see if I can pull this up for you. The story of the New York Times was all about Mohammed bin Salman. And I guess to add that to the stage, I got to see how I can do that. Okay, I think this is the story here. Let me just pull it up from me up here so I can see it too. So the New York Times reported today, Julian Barnes, Tyler Page, and Eric Schmidt did the reporting here from the New York Times. Extraordinary work in really painting a picture of how compromised this president is. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been pushing Donald Trump in a series of phone calls over the last week to continue and escalate the war against Iran. MBS is telling Trump that he has an historic opportunity. Listen to this crap. An historic opportunity to remake the Middle East. He's arguing that Iran poses a long-term threat to the Gulf that can only be eliminated by getting rid of the government in Tehran entirely. Of course he does. The Saudis hate the Iranians. The Sunnis hate the Shiites. This is basically the war we're seeing unfold here. They'd love the Americans to get rid of the Iranian regime. Of course they would. It's their competitor in the region. But the fact that he's doing it so blazingly and so openly by lying to the president of the United States is mind-blowing. According to people briefed by American officials on these conversations, Prince Mohammed has specifically advocated for ground operations. American boots on the ground is what he wants. He pushed Trump to consider putting American troops into Iran to seize energy infrastructure and force governments out of power. So in the last few days, he's also been talking about this Karg Island. I don't know if you've been hearing about it. This would be a huge operation for anybody. No one could actually pull this off. So the MBS is really sending American troops into a death trap. This is Karg Island is a hub of Iran's oil infrastructure. It's really important. It's unlikely that American troops could take it. If they could, it would be a miracle. But we're talking about the amphibious marine operation that would basically have to get through the Straits of Hormuz. Very difficult to get through in any light. Never mind to try to get through that, and then make its way to Karg Island. This is not Venezuela. This is not that kind of operation. This is going to be extremely difficult to pull off. If he decides to do this, he's going to cost millions and millions, sorry, not millions of lives, millions of dollars in spend, but also many American lives. And what's galling about this, and it's the theme of today's show, is that the president is even entertaining the Saudi demand, request. I don't know, what are they, our clients? I can't tell whether we now are just a mercenary force that gets hired by other countries to do their work for them, because that it is what it looks like. You know, if your sons and daughters are going to war, they're going to war because Donald Trump has sold them to Saudi Arabia, or sold them to Israel, or sold them to whoever might be the highest bidder, Russia in this case, in order to get some benefit for these countries. And so he can make a buck too, which we've seen, of course, in that trade we were talking about today. It's an excellent picture that accompanies the story. It sort of tells a lot about the double-sided nature of this relationship. There might be a little bit here that I can share with you. about Corrig Island. This is a satellite image showing smoke rising from the Ras Tanura oil refinery in Saudi Arabia after a drone strike this month. So I guess he's saying we were struck, we can go after them. I don't know. MBS has no business doing any of this stuff anymore. It's stunning to me that this man who installed President Trump in 2016 with Vladimir Putin and Bibi Netanyahu, who installed Donald Trump, is even allowed into the United States. Now, I know these sovereign funds have a lot of money, but we also know now, as we've been proving in the greatest heist, exactly how they got that money. They stole it from the American people. So, we either are going to continue to be suckers for sovereign funds and billionaires around the world who know that they can find whomever to do their dirty bidding here in the United States and steal all our money, and we'll end up with nothing at the end, or we're going to put a stop to this. We got to decide, and hopefully we do this in the next election, that we are not going to be that country anymore that gets stepped on by every country that has been able to game our system to their own benefit. These countries have done nothing to earn the money they have, nothing at all. They've stolen it from Americans. And now they're using their stolen funds to try and destroy us completely. And if mortgage-backed securities wasn't enough in the 2008, now they're going to be doing it with crypto, because why not? Why not try another scheme, another scam against the American people? And Donald Trump and Howard Lutnik are exhibit A for how they're doing it. It's appalling. And that is our show today. We started off the show with an update on what was going on with our number one story, which is still the incredible events at NTSB is reporting the failures at LaGuardia, where two pilots died on an Air Canada Express from Montreal the other day. It's the saddest stories. I've covered many plane crashes. This one, thankfully, only 2 people died, but there's nothing more frightening for every human being alive to think about what it must be like to be on a plane as it crashes. Can you imagine being those firefighters and watching this plane, head towards them at 105 miles an hour? Amazing they survived. Amazing that the air stewardess was able to survive after being ejected. Amazing the 72 passengers, maybe even more, on board were able to survive. But we shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be. That shouldn't be our base here. Our base for this Trump administration is lucky to have survived. And I think that's going to be the story for the whole administration. Are we just going to be, is this country just going to be lucky to survive Trump as he pillages his way through our entire economy, as his commerce secretary, so compromised by Russia and so compromised by crypto, starts instituting laws and regulations that take away the US dollar and replace it with crypto until they can tank that? As they steal all our resources, as they send all our military into harm's way, as they basically disregard the value of American life by forcing American soldiers into illegal activities, illegal orders, illegal wars, war crimes. This is where this country is being sent to by this administration at the behest of these client sovereign funds, these billionaire funds that have basically stolen America from us. The power in America still, according to the Constitution, resides with the people. And we'll have a chance in November, and I believe we will have a chance in November to absolutely show this administration and show the world what America really believes. But we may not have that chance in November. We see exactly what he's doing to try to rig those elections. But if there's one takeaway from today's show is this disaster that the Trump regime is, we're going to be lucky to survive it. And we better hope that we can get out of it before they completely destroy everything. So no matter what you're doing today, take it upon yourself to do something. I don't know what that is. For you, maybe it's going to the PDA meeting. Maybe it's just picking up your phone and having a conversation about politics, having a conversation with your friends that maybe they don't want to talk about politics, but you got to talk about politics. Because what's going on in America will devastate your kids, the next generation, and the next generation. It's hard to imagine America could actually ever rebound from the mess that Donald Trump is really leaving behind. Now, I know all of you know that because you watch the show and you're up to speed on things. But a lot of people don't get a chance to watch this content. We get ultimately sequestered away in our little universe. It doesn't get to be mainstream. None of the reporting I did about Howard Lutnik you'll see on CNN. None of the reporting you'll see on Howard Lutnik will appear anywhere, which is also kind of stunning, really. Don't you think it's stunning that the only place you can get this reporting about Howard Lutnik is here on Narrative? No one else is covering it. This is the depth of control that money from these sovereign wealth funds that have acquired all the state media, that have acquired everything. This is where we're at. So for those of you who do subscribe to me, I want to thank you very much. It does not happen without paid subscribers. So if you can become a paid subscriber, I really do appreciate that. These investigations are lengthy and complicated. I've been at it for 10 years. And so this one's going on and on and on, but I appreciate everyone's support. It's every story today that I've told you about, particularly the Lutnik story, is funded by the paid subscribers who I know have a lot of money. I ask, and it's not in everyone's budget to be able to do that, and I appreciate those people who can. And if you can't, if you really are under state support or anything like that, and you really want to be a subscriber, DM me. I'm going to try to get to as many of those DMs as I can, and I will give you subscriptions. But if you can be a paid subscriber, that's what funds all of this. That's what funds all this reporting, and it is the ultimate privilege of my life and the greatest honor of my life to be able to do this kind of stuff. But it is also work that comes along with some risk. And I appreciate that you're here today. I appreciate you for sharing your time with us, and I want to appreciate everybody else on Substack that I share this platform with. So many great people who say so many good things every day, who share so much information. And I want you to support them too, because they do enormous work and they're all taking great risks too. And they're all beginning to stitch together a community of journalists and independent voices here on Substack that is remarkable, that I think is going to be, when history looks back, as one of the resistance points of the people against this regime. I think Substack is absolutely showing it can be. Now, they may prove otherwise along the way. They may shut us down anyhow. But right now, there are voices on Substack that you can't get anywhere else. And let me also, while we're here, ask you to follow Scott McFarlane, who's a friend of mine from CBS News, an incredible reporter, a real reporter from Washington, D.C. He's been at it for 20 years or something in the Hill. He's helped me with my reports a few times. We did a lot of coverage of Jan 6 together. Highly recommend. Scott, I think, is the #1 bestseller or new bestseller on Substack. He's worthy of your support, so give him a subscription. Dean Bundell, who couldn't be here today because he's feeling a little sick. We love you, Dean. Get better. Follow him too at deanbundell.substack.com. Follow Ellie Leonard. Follow Lev Parnas. Follow a lot of people. You know who they all are. And if you have any recommendations for people that we should be talking to here on Narrative, let me know. That's the show today. If anyone has any questions, I can take them. But if not, I'm going to jump off, and then I'm going to get that next story about Lutnik ready. This Tether story is mind-blowing. So check it out. I'll hopefully get it up in the next 2 or 3 hours. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Fivestack with Dean tomorrow at 3 p.m. Hopefully it'll be at 3 p.m. And a reminder that today's show is brought to you by groundnews.com. These are one of our best resources for any where is it? Here we go. For any, it did not show up. There we go. For any news analysis, Ground News is an incredible way of finding news stories using AI and other algorithms to really spot the news that you're not getting from the mainstream outlets that you normally consume the news from. So it looks at a bias meter and it says, hey, you've missed some stories perhaps on the right wing or the right leaning media, and it exposes those stories to you. I find story after story after story there every single day. And for our Fivestack audience, for our Fivestack viewers, we have a deal now with Ground News to give you 40% off. And you just have to go to groundnews.com/Fivestack. That's groundnews.com/Fivestack. And it'll be there for you, 40% off this incredible service, groundnews.com. That's the show. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.